Hello and welcome to Keep Right On, a Birmingham City podcast brought to you from us here at Birmingham Live. I'm Brian Dick, and I think today I'm probably the marginally happier of the two of us, or the marginally more positive of the two of us. I'm joined by Alex Dicken, who spent Saturday afternoon in Rotherham, which probably wasn't a hugely enjoyable experience for him, but he's here and happy to talk through his findings from that match at Rotherham, look ahead to the run-in, and as ever, discuss your takes and questions. Hello, Alex. How are you?
Brian, how many of my Saturday afternoons away from St Andrews this season have been positive and enjoyable? Not that many.
I can find the answer to that.
Three.
It's three, is it? Okay.
Yeah, and one was midweek, so that doesn't count. It was another difficult away day for Birmingham City. Far too many this season. We all kind of expected Rotherham to yield 3 points, didn't we? Given that Rotherham are 24th in the league, already relegated to League One. But it just didn't pan out like that. You know, Blues had a couple of chances second half. They had a chance actually in the first 2 minutes. Tyler Roberts probably should have done better. And then second half, Jay Stansfield had the ball in the net, but it wasn't given. And obviously Koji Miyoshi had a chance at the end. Half chance, to be fair, on the turn, and he couldn't take it. So spoils were shared, not the result Blues wanted, not what they needed. And then obviously there was the double whammy of Sheffield Wednesday going on to beat Blackburn on Sunday to put them back in the relegation zone.
Yeah, obviously there was a huge amount of, disappointment is probably just at the starting point of the emotion post-game, wasn't it really? For me, it was a classic case of disappointment being the distance between expectation and reality. You know, the expectation was after the Coventry game that Blues would go there and sweep relegated Rotherham away. The reality was that Rotherham had a new manager in the week, and they were, I think, probably a little bit more, well, probably quite a lot more fighty than we expected them to be. And the disappointment is found in, as I say, in the disparity between those two concepts. So, yeah, it was disappointing. Let's come on to what was missing, really, Alex. Obviously there was such a big difference between the Coventry performance and what happened on Saturday. Why couldn't they get going?
It's been a theme of this season, hasn't it? Whenever Blues have put in that good performance, then the next one has invariably been a poor one. I wasn't expecting them to match that Coventry level, to be honest. I was hoping they'd get close to it, because I thought if they got somewhere near it, they would beat Rotherham. There just wasn't a great deal of urgency after the first few minutes. I mentioned that Roberts chance. Keshi Anderson did very well to create that, but they weren't able to build on that. Rotherham grew into the game. There was obviously that stoppage where the fan was taken ill in the stands, and there was about a 30-minute break in play. Which I'm not sure it was to Blues' detriment, because they weren't exactly in the ascendancy. It was a very even game when that happened, and Rotherham came out and obviously seized the initiative and took control of the game towards the end of the first half, and probably had the better chances if there were chances. They're getting more crosses and having more territory. But Blues didn't react quickly enough in the second half for my liking. They didn't really start playing with urgency until the final 20, 15 minutes. The Stansfield goal seemed to spark them into a little bit of life. Siriki Dembele did well off the bench as well. The subs had a little bit of an impact, Dembele, Miyoshi and Bakuna. But there wasn't enough for me. There wasn't enough urgency, probably similar to the Cardiff game in that when they fell behind in that one, there wasn't very much urgency in those final 30 minutes. There wasn't enough urgency for my liking against Rotherham, particularly given the fact that break in play for the fan to be treated by paramedics obviously resulted in the game finishing 30, 45 minutes later than it initially would have. So that led to Blues knowing exactly what had happened in that Huddersfield game, Huddersfield against Swansea. Obviously, Swansea had beaten them 4-0. And I just naturally sparked a little bit of urgency in itself, and it didn't really seem to do it. So that was, again, probably the most disappointing thing. Why? What went wrong? I just think the urgency wasn't there again.
Yeah, you can debate formations and who should play in certain positions, and no doubt we'll certainly come on to one of the positions in a minute.
Yeah.
But it stands and falls on attitude, doesn't it? And energy and appetite. Now, that's not the same as saying that these players don't have appetite and they're not trying their best. It looks to me like, there were spaces against Coventry for them to exploit and play in, and there wasn't much space against Rotherham. Rotherham were very compact, weren't they? And it just felt like that they were seeing the ghosts of games past, away games past a little bit, or games against teams towards the bottom of the league that have sat in, and they just don't have the ingenuity or the confidence or that fizz just to open up strong defences. So yeah, it's not to me that there's a lack of care there or a lack of passion. It just feels that confidence is really, really low, even after that Coventry game. I mentioned that we'd look at some of the selections. That said, obviously the one that stuck out massively pre-match was the return of Oliver Burke for the first league start since New Year's Day, which coincidentally was Wayne Rooney's last game, wasn't it, away at Leeds? Firstly, I know you spoke to Gary Rowett and asked him about that selection. So what did he say? And I was going to say, how did it go? I mean, it's fairly clear how it went, isn't it?
So yeah, Rowett put it down to feeling there was a need for more physicality in the Blues 11. We know that he's mentioned a few times in the 5 games prior to the Rotherham one that Blues are obviously missing, the more physical players in the squad. Obviously, Burke is one of those. Mark Roberts has also been out injured, and of course, Lucas Djukovic has been out injured as well. So Burke and Roberts returned to the squad. Burke went straight into the 11 at the expense of Koji Miyoshi. So clearly, that is a kind of big physical boost, isn't it? Oliver Burke's a far more physical player than Koji Miyoshi. But having said that, as you said, Brian, it didn't work, did it? He played the first half and was taken off at half time. I asked Rowett whether that was anything to do with an injury, because obviously he has had muscular issues in the past couple of months. But Rowett said it was kind of half and half. Probably he wasn't going to play on for any more than the first 5 or 10 minutes of the second half anyway. And Rowett recognised that the change was needed, even though Burke seemed to be struggling as well. Probably physically, he looked like he was blown a couple of times towards the end of the first half, which is probably understandable given he'd not played any games, really since January. He had a couple of moments where he got into one very good position early on, pretty much through down the right. He got into the box and had to pull it back towards Keshi Anderson, but the pullback was so poor, was nowhere near Anderson. There were a few touches where he just kind of miscontrolled it. One on the far touch line where the ball was played into him by Ethan Laird, and he touched it straight out of play. He won a couple of headers, but there wasn't enough there, and there hasn't been enough there in Burke's entire time in a blue shirt, has there? Let's be honest. And fans, I'm not sure I agree with fans booing their own players, but fans turned on him towards the end of that first half. I think it was probably more just to let Rowett know that they wanted him to make the change. I don't think there was ever going to be any danger of Burke coming out of that second half, to be honest, after the way the first half unfolded. And Koji Miyoshi obviously came on, and I thought Miyoshi did quite well. But Miyoshi always does well, in my opinion. I think he's a very, very good player, and that was probably part of the anger from the Blues fans that he was taken out of the team, because he is someone they like and appreciate.
That said, Miyoshi has got to do better with that chance at the end. Yeah. I mean, it's at championship level. It's virtually a tap in, isn't it? Is he 7 yards out, 8 yards out?
It's not tapping, is it, Brian? It's not tapping.
Well,
it's not.
But the fact he did tap it probably suggests it wasn't a tap in. No, you're right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that it was. I'm no XG statistician, but that must have been as close to 1 as it's possible to get without being a goal. Burke was there for his physicality. Let's give the guy a chance again. Was there any of that? Was he evident defending set pieces, which I know is not necessarily what you want from your winger, but did you see anything positive in what he was supposed to be bringing to the team?
Yeah, there was a set piece or two first half where I think he was one of the players guarding the near post and the on the 6 yard line, and he did meet balls. He won a couple of aerial challenges, one against Cone Bramall that he just headed straight back to a Rotherham player, but he did show that physicality. I think the other side of that physicality is obviously the speed he's got. We've not, in my opinion, we've not seen that enough used effectively enough this season. When you've got a player whose primary attribute is his pace, then you want him to get the ball and beat players and get to the byline and deliver. And Burke doesn't do that anywhere near enough for my liking. And whenever he does get into a position where he can cross, inevitably, his final ball is quite poor. I just think there are better options for Blues, and I think they've coped well enough without him in these last 5 games under Rout. They've won 2 games of those. We must not forget. I didn't feel the need to go and play Rotherham at that game. I think Blues had the quality to go and play their own game, and Miyoshi is very much central to that in the way he plays. Rout touched on something afterwards about having the quality to play around these physical teams. And I think if you're going to do that, which is what Blues have to do, because they are a smaller team, then someone like Miyoshi is far more useful than Oliver Burke.
Yeah, and Burke is at his best when there's a high defensive line and there's space to run into. No, I don't suppose that happened at all against Rotherham, did it?
No, but in Rout's defence, I will say I think he was probably caught a little bit off guard by the formation Rotherham played. I think he might have been expecting a back 5, and it transpired they played a back 4. So I think he was anticipating Burke would get more space in behind a wing back. But obviously that didn't happen. So the game plan for Burke in particular kind of went out the window.
Yeah, indeed. Which we've probably sucked as much life out of Oliver Burke on Saturday as we probably can there. Which let's move on to where it leaves Blues now. Sheffield Wednesday's 3-1 win against Blackburn Rovers yesterday put Blues into the relegation zone, and it was. If Blues were hoping for a favour from John Eustace, as I think Christian Bielik alluded to, then he certainly didn't get one, because the 2 of the 3 goals that Blackburn conceded were horrendous, including an Enkelman-esque own goal from Ainsley Pears. It was. As I say, that has left Blues in a very difficult position, and one that shows they just cannot be reliant on other teams. I'm just going to flash it up there, which won't work if you're listening on a podcast. But we have Rotherham down in 24th position, Huddersfield on 44 points in 23rd, Blues in the final relegation spot on 46 points, and then above them, Sheffield Wednesday 47, Plymouth 48, Blackburn 49. What's your early assessment of that, Alex, and the fixtures that are remaining to come? Everyone's got 2 games left. Yeah,
so I mean, on paper it looks a bit bleak at this stage. I know Blues don't have to go to Huddersfield next week and win. I know there is a scenario where they could draw that game and everything would be fine. They'd still stay up on the final, could still stay up on the final day. But I look at that game now, you have to go and win that game. If you win that game, Huddersfield are relegated, and the likelihood is that Blues will be one of 4 teams playing for one final relegation, to avoid one final relegation place on the final day. I was making that up as a prize then for a second.
You've also on our podcast plan, you've also inverted the league table. So we're going from 20. You've got 23rd at the top, down to 18th or 19th at the bottom. I mean, it's a strategy. It's something Nottingham Forest might try. To be fair, that sort of strategy, turning the league table upside down. But yeah, sorry, go on.
We've got to win something. Huddersfield. I mean, Blues beat them. Huddersfield are down. They're gone. They're not coming back. They're finished. So 1 place between 4 teams. Blues obviously got Norwich at home on the final day. Hopefully Norwich will have nothing to play for. I don't know whether that will make it easier or harder for Blues. If David Wagner is in a position where he can make change ahead of the playoffs. Sheffield Wednesday at 21st, now 47, as Brian said. West Brom at home and Sunderland away. Those two fixtures, I think West Brom have won one of their last 6, and that was against Rotherham. Although, as we mentioned before we came on, we were talking about that they absolutely pummeled Leicester at the weekend and somehow managed to lose that game. I've never seen a player make 3 goal line clearances in one game before Hamza Chowdhury managed that to keep West Brom at bay. And also, Sheffield Wednesday play Sunderland away. Sunderland have won 2 of 13. So, it's not inconceivable that they could get another win from those 2 fixtures.
I think it's likely. I think it's likely.
I do as well, which is why, Brian, I want to look at Plymouth and Blackburn in more detail, because I think those 2 teams, especially if Blackburn lost Sheffield Wednesday, Blues can catch them. I genuinely think they can. Like Blackburn have got Coventry at home and Leicester away. Plymouth have got Millwall away and Hull at home. Millwall away is probably the hardest away game in the league at the moment. They've taken 13 points from the 15 available under Neil Harris. Hull at home, I mean, Plymouth could get a result there, but Hull, again, in contention for the playoffs. Same with Blackburn, Coventry in contention for the playoffs. Leicester away, no one wants to go there. So those 2 teams have got probably the most difficult fixture lists for me. And I still think they're very much in the battle, even Blackburn, who have 49 points, because Blues' goal difference isn't worse than Blackburn's. 1 win at the weekend against Huddersfield, 1 defeat for Blackburn against Coventry. Blues are ahead of Blackburn all of a sudden.
Yeah, indeed. And I suppose the one small variable, which is probably a little bit a couple of circles too far removed, but it might just be relevant, is that Coventry play Hull this week. So potentially one of them will still be very much in the running for the playoffs, and one of them might be, might not have a chance. So, I mean, it's impossible to predict a single championship, the outcome of a single championship match. Never mind 1-2 games down the line that might depend on results beforehand. So, still very much all to play for. Should we move on to takes, Alex?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, Gary Nelson's first take. My take from the weekend is that going out to win suits this team and the situation better than trying not to lose. Do you think that's fair? Do you think Rowett did that? Did they go? Yeah, did they go out to not to lose or to win?
I don't think they went out not to lose, because they created the openings to win the game. When you think of the Tyler Roberts chance in the first 2 minutes, when he looks back at that, he'll probably think he should have scored. I know it was a volley, and it was coming at him, over players, but still, it was a free hit, and it was only about 10 yards out, so he should have hit the target. If he hits the target, he probably scores. They created a chance of Miyoshi at the end, probably a little bit too late, but there wasn't a great deal of urgency in the second half, as I said before, but they could have won the game. They created enough chances to win the game. They created 2 or 3 decent chances. I can see why people would think that with a team selection, because he took one of the most influential players out in the Coventry win and brought in a player who's not done an awful lot in a blue shirt. But I think he probably was just creating a balance, or trying to find a balance between, an expansive style, which Blues have had to play to score goals in recent weeks, and a team that could go to Rotherham and defend set pieces. And he found that in that they kept another clean sheet, but the quality wasn't there throughout the entire game. And to be fair to Rotherham, they probably had, I mentioned those chances Blues created, Rotherham probably had some of their own, didn't they? Hugel had a headed chance first half that he got no power behind, and they felt quite aggrieved that they didn't have a penalty in the second half. So, swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Blues weren't good enough, really, in my opinion, to get the 3 points, but I don't think Rowett set up not to win the game. I think he went for the win in a sensible, cautious manner. Probably it was one of those where he just desperately did not want to lose, because he knew it would hurt them going to next week's game.
Yeah, it's 2 sides of the same coin, really, isn't it? It's how many men do you commit forward, and what kind of players do you pick in an effort to win, whilst taking a risk of potentially leaving yourself light at the back, both physically and numerically. So, yeah, absolutely. Danny has asked, Kieran says, regardless of league season and the changes in person, I'm butchering this. Regardless of the league next season, And the changes in personnel, there needs to be huge work done to the team's mentality. Teams in the Championship will always be inconsistent, but not this bad. How Blues go from ripping apart Coventry to not throwing a punch against Rotherham is baffling. I think my first observation to that, Kieran, would be, styles make matches, don't they? Like in boxing. And Coventry came to St Andrews needing to make the pitch a little bit bigger, needing to create some space and therefore leave some space to try and win a game of football to get into the playoffs. Blues were able to capitalise on that. They used those spaces quite well. Rotherham didn't really, there wasn't a lot of space on the pitch, was there, on Saturday, Alex? Therefore, it became they were a more difficult nut to crack. The ball wasn't on the ground a whole lot. It was in the air. The press was, because Rotherham weren't really playing out that much. The press, was kind of negated, and therefore it's difficult you couldn't win the ball in a high up in a dangerous position. So it's very much of you are to a degree dependent on what your opposition does. What would you say to Kieran's take, Alex?
I think I agree with you there, Brian, when you were saying about, obviously, Rotherham are a side that aren't going to play out from the back. They're not a side that's probably going to press you a great deal when you're playing out from the back. So it's about breaking them down, isn't it? And that's why, the Miyoshi thing puzzled me a little bit, because obviously he's probably a player, one of the more creative players who can get in between those lines and find those passes to break down stubborn defences. Whereas Oliver Burke, as we know, is a player that needs space to run in behind. And aside from that first, 5 or 6 minutes when he was able to get in behind Rotherham, there wasn't an awful lot of space for him to do that. So with regards to Kieran's take, I mean, I'm not sure on the inconsistency thing, because Blues have been consistently bad for a lot of this season. 22 defeats from 44 games says that. But yeah, I completely get the point. And it is absolutely baffling. And I asked Christian Bielik this after the game and said, how the hell can you go from the performance we saw against Coventry to, not being able to break down? It's what I come back to earlier, Brian, when I was saying that you just hope they could get somewhere near that Coventry level, because they'd be able to beat Rotherham. And they got nowhere near it, and that was the problem. They, in terms of attacking and the way they moved forward and the patterns of play, they were just completely off it compared to what we'd seen the previous week. And it proved costly in the end, because that was the game that I thought they needed to win, because it really puts the pressure on going into that Huddersfield game now.
But they weren't presented with the same problems, and they didn't have the same players to solve those problems either. So, yeah, Rowett said at the end of his interview, I think, that they kind of have technical players, or they have physical players, but not many of the same thing wrapped in the same package, which is ideally what you need. And that comes back a little bit to recruitment. Maybe the people doing the recruitment thought that the Blues would be able to play their way up the league this season, and I know that is the long-term intention. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, can you? You do need to earn the right to play. Interesting take that, Kieran. Thank you. Richard says, I don't think most of the squad should be here next season. No fight, no backbone. Rather have James, Dixon and Donovan. Yeah, interesting. I think Jordan James, that might be a little bit hopeful, Richard, to be honest with you. I think both Alex and I probably expect either Blues to cash in or James to move on. Would you say, what prospects of Jordan James being here next season?
Yeah, I don't think there's any prospect really. Even if Blues are in the Championship, I reckon they'll cash in this summer. Well, obviously that depends if the right figure arrives. But I presume, based on this season, there'll be a lot of interest in Jordan James, and if there are Premier League teams, then they'll probably get to a figure that Blues feel is acceptable, and then they can obviously reinvest that money elsewhere. But yeah, I'd be surprised if Jordan James was here next season. Regards the other two who spoke about, Junior Dixon, probably more than any other player who's never played for the club's first team on this podcast. But yeah, I think that his chances this season are obviously gone. Potentially next season, pre-season, be a big one for him. See whether he can get towards the first team. If not, probably a loan move after one season. 21s will be best for him.
Sorry, Alex, before you go on, it's not just one Blues manager that's decided he's not ready, though, isn't it? We've had plenty of managers that think that Junior Dixon may well have a bright future. Is certainly training with the first team, but there's half a dozen managers there. I thought that maybe this isn't the scenario for a young striker with all the pressure on, and I think that pressure point is probably the same true for Ramel, isn't it?
Yeah, and they are more qualified than us. Ramel, I think they've done the right thing with him because he had a real experience in Rudy, didn't he? Like he played a couple of games and then he also started a cup game under Mowbray. Played a fair bit of senior football this season during that Rooney tenure, and then has obviously dropped back down because he had to just get minutes under his belt really and play football again. And he's done very well for them in 21. So I genuinely think the talent he's got, whoever is in charge of Birmingham City this pre-season will want to have a serious look at him and see whether he can be involved next season. Again, he's probably one, obviously, you don't want to get relegated to League One, but if Blues are in League One, he is somebody you would expect to get more minutes and more involvement. If they're in the Championship, I'm not so sure, but it's one definitely for pre-season, that is with Ramel Donovan.
Tempting though it is to see some of the goals he scores for the under-21s and things. We'll have a bit of that in the first team, isn't it?
Yeah. I couldn't believe that one was a few weeks ago where he did some weird little flick over the player's head and then ended up volleying in the top corner. I've no idea how he did it. It did not make sense to me.
It actually defies description, doesn't it? That goal, and he scored another one last week, I think, didn't he, as well from outside the box, which was not as impressive, but would probably win goal of the season for the first team this season. Mick says Huddersfield seem to struggle with a guy cutting in from the left at the weekend. Surely it's all out attack now, and Dembele would be ideal. Just to pick up on Mick's point, Huddersfield were beaten 4-0 at home to Swansea on Saturday. I think they were level with about 17 minutes to go, literally 0-0 with 17 minutes to go. Then they crumbled like cheap cake. Yeah, and I mean, they seem to have problems with anyone that was running towards their goal by the end of the game. But they did also, I think, the first goal, certainly the first or second goal, came down that left. So Dembele, you made reference to Dembele impressing you a little bit at the weekend. Dembele, a first name on the team sheet.
I'm not quite sure with the first name on the team sheet. When I spoke to Gary Rout last week, he kind of gave the impression that he's probably going for a more solid option on that left wing. And Keshi Anderson is, although albeit not as talented as Dembele on the ball, I think he probably is a little bit more, he fits into the structure better and is probably a little bit more defensively sound than Dembele. Doesn't leave Buchanan as exposed. One thing I will say about Dembele is I think on Saturday when he came on against Rotherham, and again, he only had about 15 minutes, but that was probably the most impressive and engaged performance I've seen from him in maybe 2 or 3 months, probably since the early days of the Mowbray era. And I'm not sure he'll have played his way to a start, but when Rowett considers what Dembele did previously against Huddersfield and how much of a torrid time he gave them, then never know, maybe he will be in the running, because he certainly played a lot better and seemed a lot more kind of invested in what Gary Rowett wanted from the Birmingham City team when he came on against Rotherham.
I mean, Blues have got to score a goal, haven't they? Is the short answer, and Dembele would, seems the most likely option of them doing that. Albeit that's a very, very simplistic view of as I said before, there's a balance between a risk and reward, and you get your reward with Dembele, but you also get your risk. But they're going to have to score a goal at some point, which brings us on to questions. Joe Watson. Joe, this is a podcast on its own. In fact, this is a series. This is a series of podcasts and a print pullout. Joe Watson asks, in both of your honest and unbiased opinions, why do you think it's gone so wrong this season? Alex, you've got 2 words to answer that question. Why has it gone so wrong this season?
Need 2 years. So basically, in short, my own opinion on this is the constant chopping and changing, the decisions of the managers. Firstly, John Eustace goes and all of the players are doing well, and the rug is firmly pulled out from beneath them. The rule book, the playbook is completely ripped up when Wayne Rooney comes in, does a completely different thing with a group of players designed to play a certain way to John Eustace. Did not work. I've spoken to a few players since who have said on the record, in the case of John Ruddy and Christian Bielik, that it just didn't work, and it didn't really feel like it was going to work. And then obviously, Tony Mowbray came in and really, really settled the ship. Blues, I think, took 10 points from the first 6 league games under Mowbray, including those obviously back-to-back wins against Blackburn and Sunderland. Then he obviously stepped down due to illness, and Mark Venus wasn't able to carry that on. The results under him were obviously disastrous, and Blues had to make the decision to bring in Gary Rout for a short term at the end of the season. That's led to, if you include Steve Spooner for that one game against Hull City in January in the FA Cup, Blues have had 6 managers, 3 permanent, 3 interims this season. The players, it's a very, very big squad of players. That in itself can lead to problems with players not playing, players ready left out and not happy about it. But, the constant changing of messages has been probably the biggest problem for me this season. I think they had clear structure and clear messages at the start of the season. John Eustace, there's probably no reason to change it. That's a history now. We've moved on from that. But then, from Rooney onwards, it's constantly been changing every couple of months. Blues, the hierarchy could never have foreseen the illness to Mowbray coming and obviously result in this end of the season. But that's just been a massive stroke of bad luck. But they probably could have managed things a little bit better beforehand. Hopefully, this car crash of a season, it has been a car crash of a season, does not end in relegation. But I think the biggest problem for me, Joe, is that so many things have changed since pre-season, when everything seemed so rosy and structured, and it's just all been blown apart. And it's probably no surprise, given what's happened, that Blues are in this position, to be honest.
Yeah, for me, Joe, all roads lead back to the Eustace decision. If you were drawing a flow chart, all the subsequent problems flow from that decision to change from John Eustace to Wayne Rooney. At that point of the season, the squad was recruited to play the way Eustace had them playing to a degree. I think Craig Gardner and his recruitment team did try to move it on a little bit, but what they were doing is they were playing to a plan as well. And then I've always said that if you don't go looking for trouble in the Championship, because it finds you, and it absolutely found Blues. And as Alex said, everything that's happened since then, some of it controllable and some of it not controllable, all goes back to that decision to move on from John Eustace. Something that they could have done in the summer and given themselves more opportunity to build a team. Something they could have waited to do to this summer and said, potentially thanks, John, but no, we're going to move on and go in a different direction. But yeah, for me, that's where it started. It's all the subsequent failings all lead back to that position, that decision for me. So I'm just going to. What you're talking about, Brian, I'm going to bring up that Blues League table since Eustace. Okay.
When you look at it here, so since Eustace left the club, this is the league table. So Birmingham City are second bottom, 23rd, with 28 points from 33 matches. Only Rotherham have fared worse during that time with 19 points from 34 matches. Even Huddersfield have taken 6 more points. Plymouth have taken 9. And you look at Sheffield Wednesday, during that time have taken 14 more points than Blues. I think that probably kind of tells the story of how this season has unravelled. I've said it a few times. During Wayne Rooney's time, he actually made Blues the worst team in the Championship. During those 15 games, Blues were worse than Rotherham in terms of the points they gained, the goals they scored, and obviously goals conceded. But this table is damning, and probably suggests that, we look at the Rotherham game at the weekend and we all expect Blues to go there and get a victory. It probably suggests that it was never going to be a given, because over the last 33 games, Blues haven't been that much better than Rotherham, and that is probably the most damning thing you can say, because we've all kind of looked at Rotherham this season and laughed and said how bad they are, but Blues haven't been that much better.
Yeah, exactly. And we alluded to it when we had Ben and Ryan on last week on the podcast, saying that there are no guarantees that Blues go to Rotherham and win, because they've shown us this season that's not the kind of thing they do. So yeah, indeed that league table is a stark manifestation of just where Blues are standing at the moment. They're second bottom in the real. They're second bottom in that league table, and third bottom in the real league table. Danny, are fans stroke owners downplaying how bad it would be to go down? Absolutely no guarantee of coming back up. Then we need. Then there's a big £2 billion sports quarter in the Championship. Wasn't the plan. League One is an absolute disaster, and that doesn't seem to be bothering people. Alex, is there an insouciance or a lack of urgency or a lack of realisation about what might happen if Blues go down, do you think?
From the ownership perspective, it goes back to obviously the sports quarter announcement a couple of weeks ago, and I did ask Tom Wagner at the time, will relegation to League One change these plans to get this sports quarter open within 5 years? And obviously we know 5 years is a very ambitious target. And he said no, absolutely not. Reading into that, you wouldn't expect somebody at the top of an organisation who is supposed to exude confidence down to his employees to say, yes, that will massively impact the way things are going. And he didn't say that. He probably said the correct thing for his, the players and the people who work under him to give them the correct message. I don't think we can read too much into that. As far as, not being concerned about League One, I think it's more of a lot of fans are a lot more encouraged by the situation, the noises that are coming from the new owners than they obviously were under the previous owners. So I think it's more of a case that they're probably confident that if Blues do go down, and obviously nobody wants that, then they're in a better position to come back up because of the things the new owners have put in place. And judging by what the new owners have done in recent weeks in terms of announcing the sports quarter, and they've also kept employing new staff and creating new roles, it suggests they're planning, still planning far ahead of potentially being in League One next year. They're planning for, 10 years away, not, a year or two away. So I don't think in the short term it would change a lot of things. I think they'd probably still, pursue the sports quarter and get it up and running and try and get things moving with that. And probably still do all the work they're planning to St Andrews this summer. But obviously they wouldn't want Blues to be down there for 3-4 years. It would have to be a short-term thing, and you'd hope they'd have the finances in place to get Blues way above their competitors in League One in terms of the money they can spend and make sure they're at the top of League One if they do indeed end up
there. I think, listen, we've got no choice, but if Alex has asked Tom Wagner the question about what happens in the event of relegation, and Tom Wagner has said we remain committed and we'll pursue our plans. We have no option but to take that at face value, do we? I think the other point I'd make is, lots of people saying, "Oh, you can't fill your stadium now. Why build a bigger one for League One?" That's not about that, is it? It's about building a stadium that generates more revenue to buy better players to attract more people, isn't it? And whether that's League One or the Championship, symbolically, it would not be a good look. United have said that they want to put Blues in the Premier League, and if they go down this season, they'll be closer to League Two than they will be the Premier League. So, that's troubling from that point of view. And the other thing I would say is Portsmouth. I think Portsmouth have been down there for 6 years. So there are absolutely no guarantees that Blues come back anytime soon. Wolves went down about 10 years ago and brought in Kenny Jackett and bounced back and laid waste to League One. Derby, it's taken them a couple of seasons. They're virtually on the brink now. So there's no. This is how long it takes. It takes as long as it takes. What I would say, and assume if we're going from the standpoint that we're believing Tom Wagner, we'll stand by the club, and as I said, we've got no reason to dispute that. Then it won't be the Armageddon that to borrow Lee Clark's phrase, that it was, or would have been under the previous ownership. That's not to say that anyone wants to go there. Interesting thought, Danny. Thank you, John Pierce. When we're in League One next season. John's ship has already sailed. Will we be able to retain the best of a bad bunch? That's really interesting, isn't it? Because there'll be certain players in the squad that will have no intention of playing League One football. There'll be certain players in the squad that Blues will think, they've got a bit of sell-on value there. We can probably move them on and redeploy them, and redeploy that, vary the budget better. I mean that's probably a question for when it happens. But just give us your immediate thought to John's question, please, Alex.
Firstly, Brian, between us, who are we define as the best of the bad bunch? Are we talking? In my eyes, we're probably talking Christian Bielik,
Peck,
Miyoshi. Obviously, Stansfield, the lone player. Who else are we talking? Laird. Yeah. It's difficult, isn't it? I think Laird's obviously, as we've said numerous times, when he really puts it together, he's a potential PFA Team of the Year Championship right back. He's a quality player when he puts it together. He hasn't put it together enough in recent weeks. I think his season's been disrupted by injury. I think Blues will probably have some struggles to hang on to him because I don't think he sees his career in League One at this stage. Lee Buchanan's another interesting one. He signed a 5-year contract, so Blues have the cards there, whether they're in the Championship or League One. So you'd like to think they'll be able to hang on to him, but he's been a good player under Wright. He's been a good player under John Eustace. He was unsettled by Wayne Rooney, I think. He was out of favour under Tony Mowbray. In the right situation of the Championship, Lee Buchanan is a very good left back. So I think there'd be teams definitely looking at him. With Pekka Miyoshi, I don't think there'd be any chance. They've both come here to further their careers in Europe. They've both come here to further their international careers. Especially Pekka, who has just got back into the South Korea team. I don't think he'd have any chance of being in their national side if he was playing in League One. So I couldn't see Peck or Miyoshi being around if Blues do go down. Same with Christian Bielik. I think Bielik's been, in his own way, a contender for Blues Player of the Season, and I know that's bad. I know it's difficult to say that because when you think of Wayne Rooney's tenure, Bielik was one of the biggest drop-offs in terms of how he played at the start of the season to how he played in those 15 games. I think Wayne Rooney, in the way he played, made life very difficult for Bielik. Rowett has really simplified it, and he's been the most important player since Rowett came in. He was probably the most important player under John Eustace at the start of the season. So he was very reluctant to go down to League One with Derby County, wasn't he? So I'd be stunned if he was willing to do it again, particularly given the fact in the last 12 months he's lost his place in the Poland squad. He'll definitely be wanting to get back in there. So I'd be stunned if Bielik went down to League One. He has signed a 3-year contract, so again, the ball will be in Blues' court with that. So, but those are the five or six I've named there. 5, I think, players that for me are probably the top best of this bad bunch, if that's what we're calling it. But I think Blues have probably struggled to keep 4 of them definitely. I think they might be able to hang on to Lee Buchanan in the right situation because of his contract length.
I mean, recruitment is an entirely different job in League One, isn't it, to what it would be in the Championship? Absolutely. Which brings us on to our final section, Alex. I asked to have this put in. I'm now regretting it after what we've been talking about for the last 40 minutes. Positivity Corner. People know how sunny I am. So yeah. Do you want to start, Alex? What reason is there to be positive that John's ship might not have sailed just yet?
I'd almost forgotten my my positive pick during that 40 minutes of negativity. Okay, so when we looked at the table earlier, I did make reference to Plymouth and Blackburn Rovers games, particularly Blackburn's games against Coventry and Leicester. The fact that those two teams are still within touching distance of Blues, and by touching distance I mean 1 win. If Blues do beat Huddersfield at the weekend, they'll be, unless Blackburn do pull out a win against Coventry and Plymouth go to Millwall and do something that the team hasn't done in 3 months and get a victory, then Blues will be neck and neck with those two teams going into the final day, where I think I'd rather a game against Norwich at home than in Blackburn's case, Leicester away. I'd definitely rather that than the Huddersfield game against Ipswich away as well. So I think the fixtures are favourable for Blues. I'm not saying they're easy fixtures because Blues have won 3 away games all season, so even going to Huddersfield is not an easy task. We saw that against Rotherham at the weekend. Norwich at home, I think, having watched Norwich this season, having watched Blues against Norwich this season as well, I think that is a winnable fixture. And Blues could be boosted by Norwich already being in the playoffs and potentially resting players for that game. I'm not saying that will make it massively easy, but it might make it slightly easier. I'm really clinging on to things here and trying to find hope. But looking at the situation as it is now with Blues on 46 and only 3 points between them and Blackburn in 19th, I'm still quietly confident. But again, Blues have to go to Huddersfield and win this weekend. And I'm not massively confident of that because I've said that the away record's terrible. But Huddersfield are among the worst teams I've seen in the league this season. I will say that. Blues completely put them to the sword in October. And I thought Huddersfield would be down there having watched that. And lo and behold, they are. So Blues have got to show their quality again against Huddersfield and beat them.
Yeah, good effort, Alex. Well done.
Thank you.
So I'm going on a similar line. I made reference to the league table since Eustace was sacked, which showed Blues second bottom. I'm just going to flash up the league table since Rowett was appointed. Again, not fantastic for podcast listeners, but the long and the short of it is, in the last 6 games since Rowett was appointed, Blues are 14th in that league table. They've taken only 7 points from 6 games, but that is more than Rotherham, Huddersfield, Watford, Leeds, bizarrely, Coventry, Sheffield Wednesday, and quite a few others. So there has been something of a renaissance under Gary Rowett, albeit very, very stuttering. And key to that renaissance is the fact that Blues haven't shipped a goal for 3 hours and 25 minutes, 2 consecutive clean sheets, 25 minutes of the Cardiff game, and in the last 5 games, they've conceded 3 goals, 2 of which came against Leicester. So they are, whatever we want to say about them not scoring away at Rotherham, and there's certainly plenty of room for criticism there, they are defensively more secure. So that now, unfortunately, it feels like the end of the runway is coming very, very quickly, doesn't it? And just holding on to the defensive nil is good, but it's not the whole picture. They do need to score goals as well. Which brings me on to Huddersfield, who, as I said earlier, they shipped 4 in 17 minutes against Swansea at the weekend, and they were jogging about. Let's clip this and post it on Saturday night when Huddersfield have won. But it does look like Huddersfield are almost done for. That looked like a result that looked like a team a little bit resigned to its fate, to me. Now, the other side of that is they were in it for 70 minutes and it was 0-0. And if they do get the first goal against Blues, then they could be a team rejuvenated. But if Blues land an early punch on them, then I do think it'll be there for Blues to win that one. So, yeah, I mean, what have we done? We've managed 6 minutes of positivity. That's not bad. So hopefully that gives you all some comfort, something to cling on to if you're going up to the John Smiths this weekend, and even if you're not. Alex, anything to add? Have we scraped the positivity barrel dry there?
I think so. You make a good point. I think the one thing Rowett has done, he's given Blues the platform to go and get 1-0 victories, hasn't he? We saw that against Preston when Blues are a team that aren't going to score a lot of goals. I know they beat Coventry 3-0, but historically this team haven't been a team that have been able to score more than once on many occasions. So I think sorting out the defence has been the right way to go. It's created a route to victory. Hopefully Blues can keep another 0 on Saturday and get a 1-0 or a 2-0 against Huddersfield, because I do think they're probably going to need that victory to stay up.
Right, thank you, Alex, for your time. Thank you all for listening and watching again. Remember to hit subscribe either on YouTube or whichever podcast platform you use. We'll be back later this week to preview the Huddersfield game, hopefully with someone who has a decent amount of insight into the Terriers. So thanks again, and it's a keep right on from both of us.